Hi, I'm Jeannette Sutton.
And I am Eddie Bertola, and welcome to another episode of the Alerting Authority. And as always, we encourage you to subscribe, follow, listen, and most importantly, participate in these podcasts. As you hear every week, we want your questions, concerns, ideas, problems, pain points, success stories, so that we all, as alerting authorities, can better do our jobs and make our community safer.
And this episode is brought to you by Bent Ear Solutions, helping governments and organizations do more with the technology they already own. Bent Ear Solutions helps government agencies, utilities, supply chain and retail companies, and financial services firms to assess the technology and processes they already have, like Microsoft 365 and Esri ArcGIS, and find smarter ways to connect them quickly and affordably. In just weeks, Bent Ear Solutions delivers a clear roadmap to streamline workflows, improve coordination, and save both time and money, a critical and necessary step before you ever buy new software. From there, Bent Ear Solutions will work with your technology staff to optimize your software, integrate your systems, and provide substantially improved operational capabilities. With public and private sector organizations needing to operate as efficiently as possible, Bent Ear Solutions provides the first step that leads to immediate improvements. Founded and led by former emergency management and technology leaders, Bent Ear Solutions knows how complex operations really work because they've been there. Their mission is simple: help organizations unlock the full potential of their existing tools to build a more efficient, data-driven, and resilient future. You can learn more about Bent Ear Solutions by clicking on the link below or checking them out at bentear.com.
I tell you, and Jeanette, you and I have both worked with Bent Ear Solutions in the past, and they are a fantastic company. And we really appreciate their sponsoring this and helping with our guest. Now we didn't say who our guest was, and so I'm going to read his bio and see if you're listening, if you can guess who this is. So this person served as President Barack Obama's FEMA Administrator from May 2009 to January 2017. Before that, he served as the State Emergency Management Director for the state of Florida under Governor Jeb Bush from 2001 to 2009. He led FEMA through more than 500, and that's like 500 presidentially declared major disasters and emergencies, including the Joplin tornado, the Moore tornado, Hurricane Sandy, Hurricane Matthew, and of course the 2016 Louisiana flooding. He is a strong supporter of the effective use of technology to support on-the-ground operations and empower all of the local decision makers. So that's a very brief bio for our guest, and it is none other than Mr. Craig Fugate.
All right. Well, Craig, welcome to the inaugural episode of our show, The Alerting Authority.
Thanks for having me.
I am, again, for anybody who is listening to this is the Craig Fugate. You have probably read his posts. He has tremendous influence in this area. And what's really nice is it actually comes with the foundation of actual experience. You see a lot of talking heads and other people that just, talk about different things. But one thing, especially with our guest today, is it's backed. And not only from the federal side, but again, he was the state, representative in this emergency management director for Florida and has been through quite a bit. And so, Craig, number one, welcome. It's truly a pleasure to be able to talk to you. My question is, and I'm saying this from an alerting authority where I am now, and I am a local alerting authority. I used to be one at a state level for California. A lot of complex issues. But for me, it's interesting whether I'm doing it locally now versus, a large, complex situation. We're having a lot of very similar issues. And it's in the way that we're communicating or not communicating with the public and with our community. Now, technology seems to be improving more and more, which is fantastic. But there still seems to be little things, and whether it's personnel or technological, I really want to get your opinion because I feel you have your finger on the pulse and you have the experience. What do you see as are areas where, as I said, we're missing the boat or where we could really address?
Well, I mean, to be blunt, I think the problem isn't the technology. Technology is an enabler. I think the problem is most local emergency managers and state emergency management agencies, as alert originators, um, fail to issue warnings. And what I mean by that is, and to be blunt, there are a lot of situations that occur that people send out what I call notifications. They use systems that are not known as warning systems to send out alerts. And they're generally without getting into naming types of technology, they're what I call the opt-in. People have to sign up for them to get the notifications. And I've seen a lot of campaigns and a lot of push to get people to download the apps, sign up for the text messages, and all that's great, except it never gets to the critical mass in the community. And to me, the acid test is not what I can get Monday through Friday when everybody's at work and I can, I have full staff. My challenge is Saturday and Sunday morning about 3 a.m. when the most junior person's on the system. Can you wake people up in the middle of the night when they need to be woke up, that they need to do something? And we've seen time and time again where emergency managers have issued notifications. They didn't issue warnings. They thought they were issuing warnings, but I don't consider an opt-in system a warning system. Now, I'm not saying they're not good tools, but I think too many people don't understand that if only a small percentage of the population is opted in and I have to send a warning out where people need to act now, that system by its very nature is going to fail. The other thing is it doesn't utilize some of the features that the warning systems do. An example, I think a lot of emergency managers don't understand that wireless emergency alerts are not the same thing as text messaging. Text messaging is a process by which it goes through the cell system and goes out individually and causes a load when you're sending out thousands to hundreds of thousands. WIA messages are actually taking advantage of the ability of cellular towers to broadcast with no bandwidth limitation to any device that can receive it. So rather than having to know a number to contact and contact that number, a WIA message is a broadcast. So I always kind of roll back, and I've been challenging emergency managers. I think we talk about a profession as, we prepare, we respond, we recover, we mitigate. Somewhere in there they throw in resilience. I'm like, that's nice, that's process. What do you actually do? And the one thing I think most emergency managers need to recognize, and it's a key responsibility, is to build and be able to implement a community-wide warning system that works 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, not tied to personnel. That it's got to operate on the worst day with the least experienced person in the middle of the night, and you've got minutes. Unlike notifications and other things, I think any warning that takes more than 15 minutes to originate, generate, and put out is probably not in time. Because when you look at why you're issuing the warning, I need people to do something right now. If it's a chemical spill and I need them to shelter in place or evacuate, if it's a tornado warning, if it's a flash flood warning, people don't have a half hour to get the message. And again, Jeannette, this is some of the work you've been doing. We have a very compressed time frame to put all this into an actionable message that is limited by the technology for the duration of how many characters I can send, how long the message can be. And I need to be clear that when people get that, they received it. That's number one. But two, they understood it. And three, they knew what to do to change their outcome. And I think too many emergency managers start with the technology and forget you first have to detect. And fortunately for U.S., the Weather Service does a pretty good job of our detections and issuing warnings for flash floods, for tornadoes, and other extreme weather. But you also have the chemical emergencies, the active shooters, the technology events that aren't going to originate from the National Weather Service. So I always go back and tell people, the first thing is you got to detect an event has occurred. That, number two, there's something people need to do immediately to change that outcome. Three, put that into a message. And again, for a lot of people, sitting down and writing a message that is, 2 minutes in length, 300 plus characters. You're not writing literature, but you've got to get it done quickly and make sure you've got all the key elements in there. Then you got to transmit it. And our two primary warning systems are the emergency alert system, which is radio, television, satellite, and those systems, and wireless emergency alerts, which are cell phones. And these are two separate systems. And what a lot of emergency managers don't know, they can be separately issued. Because one of the advantages we had is it can be geofenced to specific areas by cell towers. But whatever method I use, I need to transmit that. People didn't need to receive it. This was the other advantage of cell phones. The way they were built and designed, it's an opt-out program, meaning when your new cell phone comes, it's going to receive wireless emergency alerts and go off if one's issued for the area you're in. You don't have to register it. It doesn't track you. It's totally anonymous to your phone. It's just if that signal is broadcast by that cell tower and you're in range, you're going to get it. You can opt out of it. Everything except for a presidential message. That's one of the rules the FCC and FEMA were able to get in there. You can opt out from the other messages, but you cannot opt out from presidential. So if you don't do anything, you're going to get a wireless emergency alert with a new cell phone if you're in an area where it's set off. But now that I've received it, did I understand it? Did I understand that it applied to me and that it's an immediate call to action? I don't have time to delay. I don't have time to, go out and get on the internet and start researching and looking for other things and calling my friends and say, hey, I got this warning. It's a flash flood warning. What do you think we ought to be doing? The time to act is usually in minutes. And that's the process. Detection. Then you have to make a decision. This is something that I need people to do something different, and it's time of essence. This isn't something I can wait and do a press conference for. I have to determine what that action is, and then I have to compose it in a message that is very compressed by the medium that I'm using. Then I have to send that message into the integrated public alert and warning system and determine whether I am doing the full activation of both EAS and the wireless emergency alerts, or I'm doing something very specific that I'm only going to use wireless emergency alerts because it's a very specific location. And we'll see this a lot with wildfires and flash floods, where a countywide warning may be inappropriate for a very specific area. Now that has to go through. And I think a lot of people with these warnings or lack of warnings have always thought that's where the breakdown was. It turned out you can't break down if you never set it off. And that's where we see the problem. They're not using the warning system of the IPAW system of the EAS and the WIA. They're using a notification system that people have to opt in. Often because they use it more frequently, it's more user-friendly to them because they're using it every day. It does not carry, I think, to a lot of people the same risk if they make a mistake. And they send out a notification. And we've seen too often that it wasn't received by a majority of people, or based upon the technology they were using, they received it days after the event because the system overloaded trying to process that many notifications. So, I look at this and I'm going, why? And I've come to this conclusion that emergency managers, unfortunately, are so afraid of making a mistake with setting off an EAS or a WIA message that they are mic shy. And so even though the situation calls for it, and in retrospect, you see it, you have states like California, which you're from, that had to take the additional step, the legislature now requiring that EAS and WIAs have to be activated if you're evacuating for a wildfire. The notification systems are not considered sufficient. Now think about that. The legislatures are having to tell emergency managers how to do what is a fundamental responsibility of emergency management, which is issue warnings to the public. So I've come to the conclusion that we really need to be talking about emergency management for what we do, not the phases, not the process, and really emphasize the one universal thing that all emergency managers must be able to do is issue a warning to their community in a timely manner. Not just certain people, not just when that's, they're staffed, but 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And if you can't do that, I have a real question. Can you consider yourself an emergency management agency? One of the things I find fascinating, nothing in the CEM or the accreditation program for certifying emergency management programs really get to this issue. Can the community issue a warning? The closest we've seen is the Weather Service program recognizing communities that have taken these steps. But even that, I think, is a minimal standard. So, yeah, a lot of emergency managers aren't happy when I walk out into their state association meeting and basically say, if you can't issue a warning, why are you in this room? Are you just doing grants administration?
I just
You
want to be
raised
like,
such a
boom.
good point.
And it like, we have conversations with different alerting authorities. We travel around the United States and we're talking. And whenever there is a failure of any kind, the first thing that they generally point to, well, it's a technological issue. It's a technology issue. And for me, I have yet to see a real technological issue as in how they're describing it. It's a people issue. It's a training issue. It's a lack of confidence issue. It's a you just didn't do it type of issue versus that technology. And so I appreciate you, again, focusing on that, where it really comes down to emergency managers out there needing to, as we say, have confidence built upon competence to be able to do their job.
Right. And Eddie, I mean, we've talked a lot about this, Craig, the lack of training that's been available through FEMA independent study courses and other programs. I mean, there's been a focus within the public information officer programs, the external affairs, the crisis communications, but that's not alert and warning. That's a very different style of communication that we know that EMAC requires agencies to have some sort of a plan, but in terms of training, it's been extremely limited. Do you have thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, they do once a month testing, and that's usually the one person who's not around when you actually have to set the system off. They don't do realistic training, and they don't sit there and really test staff on here's a scenario, generate the message. Now, Jeannette, you worked with the FEMA team at IPAWS and with Ben Ayers to really come up with some tool sets to help you craft those messages. But you're still, very few people sit down. And again, this is one of the things that you don't do once a month and are proficient. I started out as a county emergency manager as we were transitioning from the emergency broadcast system to the emergency alert system. Hmm. So when I needed to notify people locally, I found that the emergency broadcast system was, I could get into it, but it took time. We had a cable override system, which was a real joy to use because you used a touch-tone phone. You couldn't see anything, and you were listening to audio prompts to know you got in there, and then you could do an audio message, and then you were supposed to come out. I had to use one during a chemical emergency, and it locked up on me in the middle of a World Series playoff game, and I couldn't unlock the system. So I've been on the other end when you've got a warning going out and the technology failed. Operator error, and you now have more people mad because their World Series game is being disrupted, not acknowledging the fact that there was a part of the community that was under shelter in place due to a chemical emergency. So I've been there when stuff didn't go well and got yelled at by a lot of people. I've also had to use technologies because we didn't have good tools. I remember the old Motorola stored voice pagers. I put them in all the hospitals and nursing homes so I could get tornado warnings out to them because a lot of them didn't even have no other radio. And I could use this for all kinds of things. I heavily leveraged no other radios. We bought a lot in Florida. And again, because we could do civil emergency messages over no other radio, which is it's all integrated back into the IPAWS system. But again, I've been there when we didn't have EAS. I was at FEMA when we implemented WIA, and I can remember going to New York City where we rolled it out there and in DC. And the cell companies were extremely concerned, very reluctant, and hard to push out because they thought this was going to be a huge issue. It turned out to be a relatively easy rollout. In fact, you started seeing more demand signal, and I think the infrastructure got built out even faster than the major carriers could say. There are some things that run on the WIA system that weren't the original intent, but probably get most people's attention, and that, such things as Amber Alerts for missing children. And I can remember there was a big, screaming, hollering about California setting one off statewide for an abduction. It turned out it was an abduction, and the child was recovered in Oregon. And after people got that information, they kind of backed off of that. But, I've been here when, we got a WIA notification, an EAS notification in early morning hours in Florida. And everybody was mad. And I'm thinking, it went off and I got it. This is good. In fact, people got woke up and were cranky about it. I'm like, yeah, I get it. We've had nuclear attack warnings go out. And so I hear all that, and to a certain degree, I'm like, I get it, but if you want a perfect system, it will never get set off. There will be problems. We can work on those. Part of it is training. But if you go back to the original concept of why do emergency managers exist, I think warning their public of immediate threats is one of our key responsibilities. But for a lot of jurisdictions, it's not a core competency.
Yeah. I think that you're right. We've seen this as we've gone across the country doing training, and have really looked into what kind of training existed before we rolled out the message design dashboard across the United States with Bent Ear Solutions, helping to provide that training. And there literally was no training available to help emergency managers to understand the science behind the social science behind how people respond to alerts and warnings, effective message design, and thinking about how all of the pieces fit together across, including technology. And it was a real limitation. I think we've improved now that we have some standard courses that we can deliver. But yeah, as a key competency, it's a real surprise to me that it's not something that is done as well as it could be, given the emphasis on how incredibly public it is. When something goes wrong, that is when people definitely notice. And a lot of times it's when they don't send anything.
Yeah, I mean, I had CBS approach me, and they were wanting to interview me about how the warning systems had failed in so many of these events. But when they actually did the interview, the story had changed. What they found was the technology wasn't what was failing. It was the failure to issue the warning. And they said, why? And I'm like, the best I can come up with are people are mic shy. They're afraid of making mistakes. They're more comfortable with systems they use every day, and their default is it's safer to send out a notification over a system that if something goes wrong, it's only going to get to a certain percentage of my population. Problem with that is that's kind of not warning people. And I think that, I try to tell people, so look, there's no way that you're going to be doing this over a career and not have things go south and people yell at you and you hear the threats, we're going to fire people. That's the easy answer for politicians. But this goes back to, you cannot put in a technological solution and then expect it to work well if you haven't trained the operators on using it and making sure they're comfortable with it, that they do the testing and the safeguards are built in to prevent the false messages, but the bias must always be to the warning goes out, not that we're going to make a mistake. We're trying to eliminate making mistakes. And you only get that through repetition. The other thing is, who's actually going to be issuing this warning? And I think this is something we used to have a concept, and this goes back to civil defense, but we used to have a concept of what we call county warning points and city warning points, where we had the old hoot and holler NAWA system as a primary call ring down system to reach those locations, who would then send the warnings out through their community and over the emergency alert system. And the majority of those were not in emergency management shops. They were in the 24-hour dispatch centers, the public safety answering points. And I think that's the other thing that I see missing, is we usually have a disconnect between the emergency management shop over here responsible for issuing warnings, yet there's nobody there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And often that other agency is also very reluctant to be issuing warnings without somebody giving them permission. And I've seen this where it's been outdoor warning systems setting off the AS, where by the time it gets to somebody who can make a decision, if you can find them, you've already lost 15 to 20 minutes. And even then, there may be hesitancy to issue the warning because they want more information. And you've seen this where the systems are built, they have a plan, but the person that decides to issue the warning was not available or was unreachable during the event, which fails the basic test. Can you issue the warning 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? This is not an 8 to 5 Monday through Friday job. So that goes back to, are we incorporating the concept of our county warning points into our warning system, realizing that may be a separate agency and not under the control of the emergency management shop, but is there staffed with the ability to do it, but only if they are trained and they're enabled to issue those warnings. If it, again, takes you, I've run into this where I've seen them like, well, we can do this remotely. I'm like, well, who can do it remotely? Well, there's like 3 people. So, well, are all 3 people on staff duty rosters so you know where they're at all the time? No. Then how do you know all 3 are going to, even one of them is going to be available? So again, it's a very fundamental thing. I think we've gotten away from so much of this as we've seen. I mean, I think people confuse a lot of our technologies with resiliency and disasters, as we saw with the cloud problems last week. There's technology is a tool, but people issue warnings. And if you haven't trained them and they aren't enabled to issue the warnings in a timely manner, it's not a technology issue, it's a people issue. And to me, that's a basic failure of local emergency managers.
So would you sum up your primary recommendation as people need to get trained?
Training is a piece of it. I think
Okay.
they really need to go back and take a system approach and design their warning system, knowing that they have a mix of tools, that they need to have a decision tree of, when do I send out a notification? That may be good for a broken water main. No sense setting off WIA or the emergency alert system for something that is only impacting a smaller area and is more of what I would call emergency public information. It's for your information so you can adjust to it. Versus, I have an active shooter in a downtown area. I have a wildfire that's crossing into a neighborhood. I have a flash flood warning that's imminent now, life-threatening flooding, where I need to get the largest number of people quickly as I can. And again, it goes back to having that centralized point where all that comes in, and not thinking that the weather service is always going to trigger this, because some of these events are not going to come from the weather service. And having that 24-hour point in your community that can receive warnings, has the ability to make decisions about what level of tools they should use. And the bias should always be, if in doubt, set everything off. I'd rather have people mad at me because I woke them up than they never woke up. And then that's where your training comes in. Because once you have your system and you identify who's going to set this off and under what conditions and all of that, now I got to train people against that. Then I need to exercise against that. And I need to understand that this is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so it cannot just be for your key folks during the day. And it certainly can't be this. I was actually doing an exercise in a community, and I asked them I generated a scenario where they're going to have to activate the IPOL system, EAS and WIA. I said, well, and they said, okay, we did that. I said, no. I want you to generate your message and actually show me mechanically how. Don't set it off, but I want you to go sit at the console and tell me how you're going to do this. They said, we'll have to get the manual. I'm like, excuse me? Well, we have to get the manual. I'm like, well, you just told me that there's like 4 of you that can do this if you're not here. But you're now telling me while you're here, you got to go get the manual to do this. I'm saying, you guys are really scaring me. I hope this is just a practical joke on your exercise simulator. If this is the real deal, we might as well stop and get down to some basics.
I appreciate that. And that's one thing that we address all the time is stop just checking the box. And we've seen it in so many exercises where it would trigger an IPAWS related warning. And they're like, okay, we checked the box. We've now done it. And it's always like, stop. No, like actually go through it. How would you write it? How would you put it in the system? Do you even remember your password to log in to your origination software? And whenever you stop them in that, I will say some of them absolutely do know how to do it. But there are those that, just as you said, have to say, well, let me go to the manual.
Yeah. I mean, again, this is not an indictment against every program, but there's too many out there that they cannot issue a warning in a timely manner. And that's, I think, the crux of the issue. And again, I've seen all kinds of levels. I mean, one of the things I'm glad that iPolish began doing was, let's now put in different scenarios so people aren't writing a test script for a test message, but actually make them start writing scripts for different scenarios, because an active shooter is a lot different than a flash flood. And getting people comfortable sitting down and not knowing what the scenario is before they have to run the test, so that they're not pre-planning everything or pulling down everything to get ready and going, okay, we're doing the test, and your scenario for today is you got a flash flood at this location. Issue the message. So that they're used to this idea that it's not a canned every day, they do it the same way all the time. The next one may be, okay, this one will be an active shooter in a downtown area, and you're only doing a WE alert for the geographical area that law enforcement wants people to evacuate, and give them different types of scenarios. So it's not just the same test message, do the tornado warning, do the chemical spill, do the things that make them think through creating the message and then issuing the message. Because I think this is where, a lot of the things that Jeannette has seen is, even when they can mechanically set the system off, the message is so poorly scripted that it is causing more problems. I think one of the better ones I saw was when a state issued a statewide EAS that the 911 system was down, except they never said what state it was. So all the adjoining states suddenly were getting bombarded with there's our 911 system down, to the point where one of the adjacent states actually had to send out a message to override the other message that it doesn't apply to this state. I mean, you would think that if you're putting it out there, you would include your location and your state. But, Jeanette's found that in many cases, that's one of the things they missed. So then people get it and go, who's this for?
Right.
And especially if it's something that's happening, that's breaking, that they weren't expecting. And, there's a lot of good books. I think one that, was written by Amanda Ripley called The Unthinkable. And she calls this process, the social science, they call it milling. If people aren't preconditioned for the event and they get something they don't expect, they're not going to react unless there's something in the message that prompts them to. So they'll start looking for other information or other sources to confirm, and that's time they don't have. Right. And so that's why that you got a short window to get their attention, make sure they understand it applies to them, what the action is they need to take, and they understand it, and it applies to them. That's not something that a lot of people are comfortable writing in a limited number of characters or a limited amount of audio, unless they're practiced at it. And I think that's, again, part of the training is the equipment, but I think more training needs to be spent on actually crafting the message and understanding that we have notifications, we have alerts, and we have warnings. And they're different. They're not the same, although the technology, people talk about alert and warnings, and I'm like, an alert just means I'm telling you something's happening, but I don't have any specific actions for you. It's like an asteroid's about to hit. There's not much you can do, but I'll tell you there's an asteroid happening. This was similar to the debate, if you remember, after 9/11, why there was, why wasn't the emergency alert system issued for the terrorist attacks? And the question was, what action did you want people to take? There was nothing specific. I mean, it'd be one thing if you had more aircraft inbound or if you had a bomb threat somewhere, but just doing a national EAS to go, we're under attack, everybody already knew that. That's an alert. It's not inappropriate, but it doesn't require the emergency alert system or the WEA system going off. Most of the time, use your notification software and have a press conference. And notifications fall in the same category. That broken water main is probably more of an inconvenience versus an emergency. But I think there's this hierarchy that people need to understand, that It's a very high level to get to a warning, but I should never hesitate if I think I need to issue the warning to get there.
Thank you.
This is awesome. Thank you. Jeannette, anything else?
Oh, I have so many questions, but I don't want to keep you too much longer because I don't want to take up your time. This has just been really, these are the things that we talk about all the time. So I appreciate you spending the time with us and sharing, and hearing it from you really makes a difference. So thank you for sharing your expertise.
Well, and
My pleasure.
our target audience with this program, I mean, great if we want the public to hear it, but it's really for emergency managers and alerting authorities, those that have, the button pushers, right? The people who are responsible for overcoming that fear and actually hitting that button. And so the experiences that we draw from are going to be real experiences, different situations. And for them to be able to hear this from you, I think is powerful, especially because as iPause was being fully developed, you weren't just a witness to it, you were a player in the development of it. And it helps us with understanding.
Yeah.
So, no,
Yes.
just thank you.
Thank you. Huge appreciation. And hopefully we'll see you at IAEM or some other event in the future. All right. Well, I hope we do cross paths. And,
only if Ben Air drags me there, but no, I don't go to many of those conferences. Although I speak to the states because they're more fun. But I was in New Mexico. I told them the very same thing. If you can't warn, you can't evacuate, and you can't shelter, how do you call yourself emergency managers?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm waiting to
Yeah.
see the T-shirt with that on there from Craig
What does it
Fugate.
say?
That line.
If you can't warn, what are you?
Yeah, but again, I think when you guys are doing the training, one of the things you really need to hammer is the public doesn't get what emergency management is when you start talking about process. You say we prepare, we respond, recover, mitigate. What the hell does that mean? We issue the warnings. People understand that. And yeah, people get mad when the bad, when it goes out accidentally and, everybody sets their hair on fire. Me, I'm always kind of like, well, damn, the thing worked. I'm pretty impressed with that. But the thing I try to remind people is they're complaining, they're breathing, they have a pulse, they're alive. It's when you didn't issue it and we lost life that could have been prevented. That's unacceptable.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And excuses don't save lives.
That's right.
It's that action. So we will let you go. Thank you so much. And we look forward to hopefully having you back on in the future, and we can tell you all the improvements that people are making.
Excellent.
Okay. So, all right.
Thank you very much,
Craig. Thanks again.
Well, I hope everybody enjoyed hearing from Craig Fugate. He speaks from his heart, but he also speaks again from experience. And you cannot doubt his conviction, his passion for this. And there's a reason why he is one of the main voices still leading the effort to continually just improve, identify areas we need to adjust, and just get better. So, Jeannette, what did you think? And if there's a point or two that you really liked from him talking, what do you think of?
There were so many points that I wanted to have longer conversation about, from talking about the certified emergency manager and the lack of consistent training for public information and external affairs leading into this role of alert and warning coordinator. I wanted to talk more about that. I absolutely love how he draws from experience, but he also draws from research, which is so important to everything that we talk about, that he has this understanding of the technology, but also the social psychology that informs the way that messages should be constructed and delivered. He understands the aspects around over-alerting and doing away with those concerns, because if the button's not pushed, that's when you've got a bigger problem. And I loved that he talked about milling And yeah, Amanda Ripley wrote about that. That was one of those concepts that comes from way before her time. I think she probably got it from Dennis Milletti when she interviewed him for her book, because that is a concept within collective behavior, which describes the emergence of new norms and behaviors among groups of people as they're making sense of the environment and the situation. And that is exactly what we try to reduce when people receive an alert, is when they get an incomplete message that doesn't make sense and they don't understand it, it really does delay action as they go searching for information to make it more clear. And that is one of the things that emergency managers can truly reduce that by writing good, clear, complete messages. And he also mentioned the training that we had done with Bent Ear Solutions, and getting out. And we trained more than 500 emergency managers when the message design dashboard rolled out. And that was one of the first trainings that was conducted that included that social science along with the technology part, and then also the practice around writing for multiple scenarios. I mean, there's so many things that we could talk about, but what did you really appreciate that Craig said?
Well, to comment what you said earlier about how there's a lack of training within the CEM program, within the official just course list that exists to address this problem.
Right.
I wanted to raise my hand and be like, call us, let us help you design a training that we can, address it. And again, the way that he did, where it's experience, research, and then testing and exercising. So I love that. I loved his story about checking the box. As you know, it's a pet peeve of mine, because I will address people and they say, we go over warnings, notifications, and alerts in all of our scenarios. And I'm like, oh, you do? And they're like, oh, yeah. And so they'll talk about it and they give the scenario. They will go over transportation issues or, whatever it may be within the scenario. And then they'll say, and we'll send out a warning. We'll send out a notification. And then they move forward. And it's that checking the box. They checked the box, they did it, when they actually didn't do it at all. And it drives me insane, because when you ask them in a real world situation, could you do it? They're like, well, of course. Then do it. Show me now. What message would you do? No one's dying. No one's screaming. This is a very blue sky moment. Can you do it? And to see the stress, and it all goes back to probably trauma I have through different experiences, right? Where I remember a search for a senior, and I was pushing, we need to do a wireless emergency alert for this in a localized area. All the information was pointing to the person, just we needed to do this. And the pushback I got from that emergency manager saying, oh, well, we're not sure, and then it's like, well, no, we need to. And the decision was made. And when they were asked to do it, they couldn't do it. And they were at their computer, and you could just see them like milling around the software going, okay, let me. And ultimately, it wasn't that they didn't believe in the system. They just didn't have that confidence or competence to actually do it. I felt so bad for them in that moment, because I'm like, that's the real issue. It's not that you didn't want to, it's you didn't feel capable of doing it. So I loved that. All those one-liners that pack so much information, right? And really defining the critical role for alerting authorities, emergency managers. Your job is to get information out there, to give people the opportunity to take that protective action to save themselves and someone else. Like that's it. And if you can't do that, right, Jeannette, why are you here? I mean, that's pretty blunt.
It is the most public-facing activity that an emergency manager will do. And it is also the thing that when it doesn't go well, people will absolutely call you out on it. And people have lost jobs, people have lost lives, people have lost so much because of the lack of training, the frankly failures of not getting a message out. But this is something that, we started the Alerting Authority because we want to be able to help. And not only with these podcasts of bringing really important voices to share with our audience about their experiences with alerts and warnings, either as practitioners or as scholars or both. But we also want to provide additional assistance to organizations and individuals that are ready to take on the challenge and improve their skills. We have done trainings, those custom trainings. I mean, 8 hours is like drinking from a fire hose. But people walk away with a really good foundation. They can join a warning boot camp to work on their message templates. We've done message audits to help to see where the gaps are in their messaging and their communication. We've reviewed their templates as they're preparing for future events. And we've assisted with developing policy and helping to create those scenarios that they respond to that differ from week to week. So they're really creating that muscle memory that's so important when they face a new hazard that they haven't even thought of delivering a message for. So the Alerting Authority, we're here and we're ready to help and to engage organizations that want to do it better.
I love it. And a special thanks one more time to Bentier Solutions for again sponsoring this and really just talk about an organization that is in it for relationships and for them to be able to help facilitate the time that we've had with Craig today. And so just many thanks to Bentier. And if you have questions or want to learn more about it, please follow the link that will be either on your screen or in the comments, or just Google Bent Ear Solutions. And please just thank you for that sponsorship. And just to close, I don't know if you have any other comment, Jeannette. Are we good for another episode?
We're good.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. Again, every second has a story. That is the premise of this. We just heard so much from Craig, and there's so much to digest that we may digest in other episodes as well. But we want to hear your stories and be able to share them with everybody else and continue to improve together. So thank you and have a great day.